How many Alexandre Dumas do you know? You probably know Alexandre Dumas pere, the creator of works such as The Three Musketeers or The Count of Monte Cristo. And you may even know his son, Alexandre Dumas fils, who wrote The Lady of the Camellias. But do you know the third Alexandre Dumas, the oldest of the three? The one who served as an inspiration to the elder Dumas, as a tormented and revenge-seeking count, or even as part of a friendly band of musketeers. In fact, the third and unfortunately most unknown Dumas was the father and grandfather of the famous writers, and General Dumas was an excellent template for any creative, since his biography is one of those special ones that probably only happens once in 1,000 years. It is the story of a slave boy who becomes a symbol of the short-lived ideals of the French Revolution, as he manages to climb the military ladder to the top with courage, talent, and humanity. From here he will fall low, as he has a powerful enemy, Napoleon Bonaparte himself, who does everything he can to get rid of the inconvenient idealist who overshadows him, the black general Alexandre Dumas. Like the story of Toussaint Louverture, this one begins on a plantation in Saint-Domingue, now Haiti. The father of our present-day protagonist, Alexandre Antoine David de la Pailletterie, is a renegade, good-for-nothing, from an old French noble family, and hides from his relatives in the Haitian mountains, with Marie Cécile Dumas, a slave of African descent, whom he has acquired at a horrendous price on the slave market. He fathered 4 children with her, 3 daughters and a son. This is Thomas-Alexandre, who was born in 1762, after Antoine received the news of his father's death, and not wanting to miss the chance to his inheritance, he quickly set off for France in 1775. He paid the ticket for the passage by selling his wife, Marie Cécile, and his daughters. However, he made an exception for his son Thomas-Alexandre, selling him on the condition that he could buy him back later. This is exactly what happened, however only after the father had arrived in France and could collect inheritance. So when Thomas-Alexandre was 14 years old, his father let him join him in France, where he arrived in 1776. On the ship of his passage he was listed under the name Slave Alexandre. But once in France he was suddenly the son of an aristocrat, Thomas-Alexandre Dumas David de la Pailletterie. His father gave him the education of a nobleman. Among other things, he learned swordsmanship under the famous Chevalier de Saint-Georges, is son of a white Frenchman and a free black woman on Guadeloupe, who was, by the way, conductor of the leading symphony orchestra in Paris, and who today is called Black Mozart. When Thomas-Alexandre was 24 years old, he decided to pursue a military career. Actually, his noble blood would have allowed him to enter directly as an officer candidate, but the racial laws of the time made it difficult for him, so he registered as an ordinary soldier in the Dragoons, a regiment that was anything but prestigious. His father, however, did not want the good name of his family to be dragged through the mud by him here, so Thomas-Alexandre registered here with his mother's name, and from now on was Alexandre Dumas. Alexandre quickly made a name for himself as a particularly big and strong man. He liked to prove that publicly by doing big strong man stuff, like carrying 2 men, constantly dueling, or lifting a horse. Besides that, Alexandre's attractiveness and beauty are also often mentioned. In his regiment, his courage and talent distinguished him, and he was rewarded for it. After the French Revolution broke out, he met his wife Marie-Louise, an innkeeper's daughter, while riding in to rescue her town from brigands. After the outbreak of the revolutionary wars in Europe, Dumas fought for France on various fronts, and within a few months rose to become second in command of the Black Legion, a free legion composed solely of free black men, led by the Black Mozart we have already met, the Chevalier Saint-Georges. The revolution and its ideals made it possible. In July 1793, Dumas was appointed brigade general, almost half a year before the Corsican artillery captain Napoleon Bonaparte received this honor. In September, Dumas even rose to division general. By the age of 32, he was in command of the Army of the Alps in the Italian and Austrian campaigns, putting him in charge of more than 50,000 white soldiers. Almost 200 years would pass before a black man, American General Colin Powell, would achieve a higher general rank in a Western army than Dumas held. Some of his opponents called him the Black Devil, yet others called him Mr. Humanity, because he showed mercy and humanity to his enemies and all the oppressed, and unlike Napoleon, was immune to fantasies of omnipotence. He was popular with his men because of his integrity and wise decision. And unlike Napoleon, whose main goal was hegemony and dominance over Europe, Dumas was all about the ideals of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. So, as might be expected, the two did not get along well. In 1776, the two men met during Napoleon's Italian campaign. Here they clashed for the first time, as their values were completely different, and Dumas defied an order from Napoleon, allowing French troops to expropriate local property. But Dumas proved himself again and again in battle, and so Napoleon could not avoid recognizing Dumas' merit. And so Dumas accompanied Napoleon on the campaign in Egypt in 1798 as commander of all cavalry in the Army of the Orient. You have certainly heard of the Napoleon complex. In fact, Napoleon was not that small, but next to the 185-meter tall Dumas, Napoleon looked quite small with his 168-meter height. This was also noticed by the Egyptians, and so they thought Dumas was the leader of the French troops when the army moved in. Napoleon could not handle that well, therefore the name Napoleon complex. But Dumas continued to prove extremely useful. For example, when he smashed the anti-French revolt by charging into the Al-Aqsa Mosque on horseback, Napoleon was so grateful to him that he promised to have a picture made of him. However, the picture Napoleon had painted 11 years later shows a white man and not Dumas. The Egyptian campaign ended famously badly for Napoleon's army. After the British and the Ottomans drove out the French, Dumas also started his journey home in 1799 to return to his family. But this was not to happen for the moment. Dumas' ship began to sink en route and he had to dock in the Kingdom of Naples in Italy. He hoped for a friendly reception, but anti-French groups had taken over in the meantime. They locked Dumas in a dungeon, where he was malnourished and kept incommunicado for 2 years. They tried to poison him, which he survived, but by the time of his release he was partially paralyzed, almost blind in one eye and deaf in one ear. After he was released in 1801, he was able to return to France. He was not the same man anymore. Neither was France the same country anymore. Napoleon had in the meantime seized power in the country by a coup d'etat and made himself dictator, and dismantled France's post-racial experiment, imposing cruel race laws in France, reinstituting slavery in the colonies, and sending an invasion force to Saint-Domingue with orders to kill or capture any black who wore an officer's uniform. You remember Toussaint Louverture, right? Napoleon set out to destroy the legacy of his former comrade-in-arms. None other than Napoleon should go down in history as a brilliant military strategist on behalf of France. Dumas received nothing for his services, no pension for his time served or time spent in the dungeon, and no further commissions for the French military. Everything was taken from him. His family became poorer and poorer. Then a ray of hope in the darkness. In 1802, Dumas' son Alexandre was born. However, only 4 years later, Dumas died of stomach cancer, a consequence of the severe prison conditions. The family then fell into extreme poverty, and it was this experience that Dumas' son, the writer Alexandre Dumas, would process in his numerous works. He wrote a literary legacy to his father. In his famous novels, General Dumas' spirit lives on. So if you didn't already know him, now you know the third forgotten Dumas. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in other exciting but lesser known figures in history, please click here.